All right, so we're going to be starting our rocket model for this course. We're going to be working primarily in Maya, and the workspace we're going to be using is very important. Let's just get this rudimentary stuff out of the way. It's the first time we're going to be using Maya. Typically, I prefer to work on the modeling standard workspace. You find it by going all the way over here in workspace, the drop down, and then you go to modeling standard. I've made some modifications to Maya that just make my life a little bit easier, and I'm going to be showing it to you guys. I'm noticing that some of you have the hypershade on. I'm going to include this in the video. It's going to look something like this, and that's because there's probably a texturing class going on. It's like a different window. You can just close it. If it says hypershade in the corner right there, you can just click here, and it'll close it. It's just a separate window Maya's using. Right? So I'm just gonna go to my workspace, I'm gonna reset it, and I'm gonna go over how I modify it to make it a lot easier for you guys. Also, if you find like a weird workspace, this is how you would fix it. You just head on over, you reset your workspace, and this is the standard way the program pops up. We have our modeling toolkit, which we're gonna be using a lot this week, and our attribute editor, but we're missing a few fundamental things I like to have at all times. Mainly my outliner, which is just a list of all my objects. It could be 3D objects, it could be lights, curves. Again, we're going to be using these a lot, so I like to have them on hand at all times. To open it, I just go over to my left side, down at the corner, right there, show outliner, and there's my list. And I also like to have my channel box open. It's not going to be super important right now, but it's also good to have because it also opens up our layer editor, which we're going to be using. And you just click right there in the corner, and it opens up the channel box / layer editor. Right? Now I can dock this over here right next to my attribute editor by just clicking and dragging it, and then just drop that right there. If it's not letting you guys do it, it could be that you have this lock enabled, and this just makes sure that you don't mess up the UI, but we do want to mess with it, so we want to turn that off. So you just toggle that off, and you can just click and drag it. That's if it's not letting you dock the channel box to the side, right? So quick overview, general overview of the program. Right now we're looking at our Viewport, right? Most, if not all, 3D modeling software have a type of viewport to work on, right? So we can actually work in that 3D space. Right now we're in a perspective view, which implies we have a 360 view of any objects we have in our scene. Quick intro on how we actually move within the program. Basically, you can learn it by remembering that we're going to be using one of the 3 buttons of our mouse. That's our left click, middle mouse button, not the scroll wheel, the middle mouse, and the right click, and the Alt key. Right? So if you hold the Alt key and press one of these 3 buttons, something's going to happen when it comes to camera motion. So if I wanted to rotate, I just hold Alt and then I left click, and this allows me to rotate my camera. Right? Alt and then middle mouse pressing on the scroll wheel allows me to pan or translate my camera. And then if I wanted to zoom in, here is when I could either use my scroll wheel or I can use the Alt key and right click, and I can zoom in and out. Honestly, whichever one is best is wherever you feel the most comfortable. Personally, I like to use Alt and right click because it's a bit smoother. The scroll wheel is snapped to like a specific unit, and it's kind of awkward sometimes if you really want to zoom in somewhere. So with Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out. Now to create an object, here we have our poly modeling shelf. For the purposes of this class, we're not going to worry about any of these shelves over here, right? They're pretty much meaningless for now. We only care about the poly modeling shelf, right? Basically, we want to make sure that we have our primitives shown so that we can create them. We're going to be starting our model, right, with one of these shapes, and then we're going to be making it more complex as we go along, right? Very important that you guys are working in poly modeling, not in curves and surfaces that also have some primitive shapes, but these, for all intents and purposes, are completely different from the models we're going to be working on, right? It'll make sense as we continue to work. So we go over to poly modeling, and if I wanted to create a primitive, Since we're going to be starting with a rocket, right, I'm just going to select the cylinder, right, and we have our cylindrical shape. Now I can move around it. Right, so you guys can play around the shape you create, just moving the camera, going back and forth as we move along, right? So, quick how to manipulate the object, super basic. We're going to remember a quick shortcut line. Q, W, E, and R are going to be our go-to shortcuts for a majority of this project. So Q, and as if you notice, over here on our left, every time I press one of these keys, I'm swapping between an option, right? Q, W, E, and R. Q is just selection. This just goes for the regular cursor. It allows me to select an object or objects or components in a scene. W is translation. And this allows me to move, right? If I select one of these arrows, I can move an object. E is rotation. You'd think it's R for rotation, but E is for rotation, just how it was arranged, right? And then lastly, R is for scale. And this allows me to, shrink down or scale up an object, or I can squash and stretch it as I'm working, right? The universal control Z to go back. I'm just going to return this to its natural state, right? Since we're going to be working from a concept that's already in an orthographic view, we're going to import it into our scene. The way we do this, first I need to select the camera. This is the most straightforward way. There's plenty of other ways to do it, but this one involves the least amount of steps, and we can just import the image and get working. So first I need to change my camera view. I mentioned that we're working in a perspective view, and this allows me to move my camera around and view the object in all angles. I want to work from an orthographic view, which is just a 2D view of my object. Right? This is going to come really handy because, again, we're going to be working from a 2D object or a 2D reference, and we're going to be turning it into a 3D object. So I head on over to panels. There's other ways to do it, but I'm just going to focus on this one because this gives me the whole list. If I head on over to the panels right here on the upper left corner, go to orthographic, I'm going to pick a front view. Right? I'm locking the camera right here because this is going to let Maya know that when I import my image, I want it to be forward facing. Right? Then I'm going to look for this tiny little image right here. It's the fifth one left to right here. This is the image plane. And it's going to open up this little file explorer. And I'm going to look for my concept. It's in my downloads. Just change over from date modified. There we go. Rocket design. And I press open. And it loads my image. Right? I'm going to move this up a little bit just because I want it to be above. If you see this grid line right here, this is essentially our floor. Right? And since I want to be working above that, I'm just going to move this a little bit forward. There we go. Next, I'm going to head on over to my channel box that we opened up later, and I'm going to be storing this in a layer. Layers are just another way for me to organize my scene a little bit more, be able to separate certain objects, turn on their visibility. They work similar to Photoshop layers in the sense that I can literally turn on and off the visibility as I'm working. With my plane selected, and I can see it over here in my outliner, I'm going to click on layers, and I'm going to create a layer from selected. Right now, not much happened, but if I play around with these options in my bottom right corner, I can turn this on and off. Right? I can turn on the visibility. And if I don't want to mess up the position on accident, I can just double click this empty space. Once, turns it into a template, which just gives me an outline of my model. Right now, it's just a plane, so it's just going to look like a piece of paper. But if I press it again, it turns it into a reference. And if I click outside of it and I try to select it, it won't let me. Right? So this won't, if I accidentally click and drag and then make a selection and mess it up, I don't have to worry about it. Right? This is essentially my scene setup. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on the outline of our rocket, and this is going to be the first part of our videos. Right, I'm gonna split this up just to make it a bit simpler. Then I'm going to be explaining how to make the wings, how to make the window, and the other elements of our ice cream rocket. Right. So I'm going to grab my cylinder, and I'm going to first turn on the X-ray, which is this option over here, and I'm just going to hover my mouse there for a bit, turn that on. And this is going to let me see through, right, to my actual rocket. We're essentially going to be tracing our model, right, from the reference. This is why it's always best to work with an orthographic view of our model. If it had any perspective on it, any weird angle, we would have to guess the position of it. It's not a big deal, but definitely the more experience you get, you can get away with it. But for now, we're definitely, if you want to work on your own concepts, make sure that it's an orthographic view of the model.
Okay, so we have to use our own rockets or that one specifically?
I'm gonna share this one later. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to perspective. I did this really quick, kind of muscle memory, but if you hold spacebar and then you hold left click on Maya, you can also change the camera view.
Oh my god.
Right? You can go to top view, you can go to the front view, and you can go back to perspective. Okay. So the first thing I'm gonna do, obviously, I'm gonna position this in perspective. It's gonna be a little awkward, but I'm gonna be manipulating my mesh first. And quick intro. I'm also gonna turn off my X-ray for this explanation. Right, basically, all of the models we're gonna be working on are based on three major components. We have our vertices. So I'm gonna hold right click, go to vertices, which are the points. And I can manipulate these individually, and this is how we would kind of shape or sculpt our mesh. We have our edges, which is anytime we have two or more vertices connecting, I can also manipulate these. These are our edges. And then lastly, we have our faces, which are comprised of three or more edges connecting with each other. And again, I can also move this around, right? We're going to be going more into detail later on, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it relatively short, right? So first, I'm going to go ahead and... okay, so I'm going to delete both caps of my cylinder. The way we can do this is if we look at the bottom of our cylinder, or we can just hold spacebar, my bottom view, right? We can see the bottom of our cylinder, and then I can click and drag and delete both ends. Make sure you make your selection in the center. If you do something like this, where you're selecting all the way over here, if you go to your perspective view again, you would be deleting the entire half of your rocket, right? So just make sure that you're at a bottom view, and then you click and drag, and then you press delete, right? We're gonna be bringing these shapes back again later, but this is just gonna make it easier for us to do the extrusions we need to build up the rocket bit by bit. I'm gonna go back to my front view, and I'm gonna turn on the X-ray, add that off. And I'm gonna be mainly working on my edge mode, or my edge components. Right? If you double click on an edge, it selects the entire ring of your objects. If you guys aren't sure which mode you're on, if you go back, if you go back to your modeling toolkit, you'll notice that right now I am in edge mode. If you click on the purple cube, on the orange cube, you're in object mode, which allows you to select the entirety of the model. Right, but I'm going to be working, for now, I'm going to be working primarily in edge mode, right? So first things first, I'm just going to try to find that initial outline of my rocket. Usually I like to go from the widest area, and then we're going to taper upward. In this case, I'm going to have to manipulate the position of the rocket a little bit. It's symmetrical, but if we look at the line, it's just slightly off-centered. So in my case, I'm going to turn off the reference, select my cube, go back to object mode. Oops, sorry. A little messy. And I'm just going to move this a little bit to the left, using the heart as my symmetry line, just to make sure it's nice and symmetrical. There we go. And then I select my cylinder again to keep working. That's something I kind of caught there real quick. Let me widen this a little bit more, right? It's very important that you guys, when you're scaling, notice that I'm doing it from the center square, or the yellow square. If you guys do it from the red one, or just the x-axis, you're effectively going to turn the rocket into an oval. Right now it looks okay, right? But if I do it, I'm just going to show you, if I do it from this direction and I go back to perspective, I'm essentially turning it into a bowl, right? So it's very important that you guys scale from the center. If you don't have it selected, it's going to be that clear blue square in the middle. And whenever you transform that, it does it on the whole area, right? You're basically scaling the entire, from all directions, essentially. Let me just undo, go back to my front view, and just scale that to position. And I'm also going to move, right, pressing W and then R to scale, just to get that base. Now I'm actually going to start adding more faces, more polygons to the object to get the shape bit by bit. So the way you can do this, I'm going to show you the shortcut, and I'm going to show you where you can find it in the modeling toolkit. If you press extrude right here on the component side, you'll notice that now my cursor changed to this little weird gizmo right here, right? Be careful with this because the position matters. If I try to extrude right now, it's just going to go all the way up and to the side, and I kind of just want to go straight up. So if the cursor appears this way, you can click on this little icon right here that kind of looks like an on and off switch. You can click on that, and pulling on the green line, you can start going up. Right, very important, the colors of the gizmos have a meaning and a direction. You can also notice right here on the bottom left corner, you have a little compass that tells you, usually Y is going to be the up direction of your model or of your scene. X is left and right, and Z is going to be your front and back. There's exceptions to this. Programs like Blender and Unreal swap where Y is front and back. It's still green, but it's swapped from up and down to front and back, and Z would be your up and down. But here, in the case of Maya, green just means up or down. So we're going to be pulling from the green line to keep going up or down depending on where we're going to go. So you can press extrude, continue to press this, and then keep going up, and then swap to your scale by pressing R, and essentially you start going along the shape of the rocket. Or you can press Control E or Control Extrude to also bring out the operation. All right, press the gizmo, go up, scale a little bit, Control E. This is a little annoying where I have to continue to shift my pivot to keep going in that one direction. Another shortcut we could use is if you use your transpose or the W key to move. If you hold down shift, notice that now it says extrude, right? It is a lot easier because now I don't have to swap whenever I press Control E. I can just pull up, go to my scale, and then scale that, right? Kind of hugging along the line of the rocket. Go up with shift, and then scale. Right now, I'm gonna leave both ends open, and I'm just gonna keep going downward. And later on, I'm gonna actually seal both sides. Right, so it's a little redundant where we kind of deleted both ends at the start. You might be asking yourselves, why did we do it this way? We could have extruded the faces directly. Personally, I like to delete both ends and extrude from the edges, just because I avoid any accidental double extrusions, which is something you guys might run into. Just make sure that whenever you extrude and you want to undo it, make sure that this gizmo isn't present, right? This gizmo over here indicates that an extrusion has happened. So if I swap out, that extrusion is still there, and I can keep moving this along. It does happen where we kind of do the extrusion, we say, oh, we messed up, we undo the position of the extrusion, but we don't do the actual extrusion, and then we try to do it again, and it messes up, where we have double faces. So you just make sure that whenever you want to undo it, you make sure that the cursor is completely gone, just in case, right? Just something that happens, and we're gonna keep extruding downward. Right? Go down like that. And I'm gonna make sure, right now we do have a bit of perspective here from the curvature of the rocket. We might be tempted to go in here and force the curve. You might rotate it or something. You might mess it up a bit if you do it this way. I'm just gonna continue going downwards. And then if it's too noticeable, the transition between the 3D and the 2D, then I'll fix it. But for now, the thing I care about the most is just getting that initial shape ready, right? So I'm just gonna keep going downwards. Control E or W, and then we move that down. I'm gonna scale this. I think I accidentally repeated the operation, so I'm just gonna undo that real quick. Scale that down. Maybe scale this a little bit. And scale that a little bit as well. Right? Going back to perspective, and I'm gonna hide my rocket here. Turn off the X-ray. And here's our basic shape, right? Right now it's kind of looking like a Nerf football, right? Right, but this is essentially the main silhouette of our would-be rocket. I'm gonna close this out by showing you guys how we can close both ends. This is a little trick I like to do. Effectively, I'm gonna extrude, but I'm not gonna move it. I'm just gonna do the extrusion by pressing Control E, and I'm gonna hold Shift and right click. And this is gonna open up some options. You know, we haven't discussed a lot of it in this class. I know I'm kind of unloading a lot, but this is why, you know, I'm making this video. If we go to merge and collapse edges, right after I do the extrusion, I can merge to center, and it'll collapse it in on itself. Right now it's pretty flat, but we can fix that later on, right? But I'm just getting those edges to work on, and I'm gonna do the same here at the bottom, where I'm just gonna double click, press Control E, right? And again, remember, as long as you did that, the extrusion happened. So, right, I'm just to showcase that this, you know, it doesn't really matter if you move it or not. I'm gonna exaggerate it and do it completely wrong, right? I'm gonna have it in this direction. Shift, right click, merge, collapse, merge to center, and it collapsed the edges. Right now, it tried to average it based on the position, so it worked, but I kind of messed it up a bit. So I'm just gonna push that up. And I'm gonna select all of my vertices, right? Just right click, vertices. Click and drag to select the entire bottom. And if I go down to scale, just to make sure that it's nice and flat, I'm just gonna pull from the up direction downward, right? Pretty subtle, but I just flattened it out, right? Obviously, we're kind of missing the interior of the thruster. We're definitely missing some support edges right here. And in the case of the top of the rocket, we can definitely round it out a bit better. Right, obviously we're gonna be hiding that with the whipped cream and stuff, but if we're sticklers about it, I'm just gonna go in here. Actually, it's easier if I just grab this center vertices right here, right click vertex, transpose with the W key. You can just pull that up a bit. And that would be it. This is the main body. Right, we're gonna keep going with the other details later on, but this should be it for the video. Right? Let me just